as a way of introducing ourselves. That's me on the left. My dad was a jazz musician. I grew up in a very musical family, and I've always loved singing. And the other guy?
That's me on the left. My right. Yeah, our right. In contrast, I grew up in the city, but I always loved drawing as opposed to music, and that's me getting into it as a little kid. Whenever people ask me when did I start doing what I do, it was pretty much since I could hold a pencil. To kick this, when we got asked to do this talk, I started mapping our relationship, I guess, which was a little bit sort of introverted and weird, but it started to come together as a nice serendipitous timeline. So I've printed it out up there. You can have a look at it a bit better. But it sort of starts both of our paths, Lenka on the top and me on the bottom, and we sort of had similar experiences in different media and met up at different points, and then eventually got together and had a joint experience towards the end. So basically this talk is structured along that timeline. Number 1.
So I didn't actually mention that I grew up in the country, but I did, and then I moved to the city when I was a kid, and I got into performing, and I was a child actor, a teen actor, on shows such as GP, like this beautiful publicity shot that we dug out of the archives. And James actually saw me on TV when we were teenagers. I should mention we're the same age. We both graduated high school in 1995. We have a very similar range of references, like, old commercials and old songs and things like that. Our jokes just go on and on because we all remember 1988. We were the same age, except
that centenary coin that everyone has.
We both had to dress up in primary school in 1998 for the bicentenary school photos.
So while Lenka was pursuing the acting part of it, I was basically in my bedroom tracing fonts because I was obsessed with anything graphic, really. I knew I wanted to use a pencil to do, make images, and I was really interested in design, so all my sort of geography projects and stuff always looked like really filial. I was more into the look of it than the content, which was good in the end, but not so good at the time, I guess. So this is around year 5, 6 for me. A bit earlier than you in that photo. Then we both went to university. I went to UTS and studied visual communications and had a great time experimenting with lots of different things. And
I went to COFA. I was getting into performance art and being a bit more experimental. I studied sculpture, but mostly did video and performance.
This time for both of us was really about experimenting with lots of different things, right? You were in performance and acting, and I was trying to do anything visual, basically. I didn't know really that illustration was a career at this point, so I was just doing photography in the darkroom. I was animating, making zines. We didn't have the internet really, so I was making little animations, flip books and stuff. It was all pretty tactile, but basically jumping into anything.
I was the same, I guess, looking back. I don't think I realised it at the time, but I was trying to flex my muscles in any direction that was vaguely to do with being creative, expressing myself, performing, but in different kinds of ways. This is 2 drawings that James did and shows the style of what he often does, showing the kind of warehouse scene that we hung out in a lot around the same area. This is early 2000s. This is the old, what was it called, Imperial Slacks or Herringbone. I don't know if anyone ever went there, but they were an artist-run gallery. And then I used to be good friends with them, and they were usually COFA students. On the right, that's Space 3 that James and his mates ran as a gallery and lived there. That was James's bedroom in the top left windows, I believe.
Which is just across the road diagonally over there.
That's right. So we were hanging around the same area, knowing a lot of the same people, but we never met at this point.
And it was a great time. There were lots of places like this. Everyone lived in strangely converted warehouses, and this... Yeah, and after this, I was in a presbytery and next to a church, so it was all big, interesting spaces. Like down the bottom of this building, we had a huge, ornate, I think it was an old bank, so that was like the foyer. So there was like this crumbling chandelier, and we redid the walls and had a gallery and had events and started the Now Jazz Festival and stuff. So we really just had our fingers in a lot of different pies, which was really exciting. Because I, like I said before, I really wanted to do something visual, but I didn't really know what professional track to take.
And we didn't have any money. Yeah, we didn't have any money.
We didn't have any money. What do we got next? So in that herringbone Imperial Slacks building, we realised when we'd been together for a while, having a lot of these mutual friends, that there was this big closing party they had there that was epic. Yeah, all floors. They're all too young. And we realised we were both there for the first time. I don't think we may have seen each other in the corridor, but we didn't know each other at that point. But all of our mutual friends were there. And then around that time...
Yeah, so we still haven't met at this point, but I decided I wanted to start doing music. Even though I'd been raised in a musical family, I was like, no, I'm not going to be a musician. But I was sort of moved from the fringe theatre world in Sydney, performing, acting, and I was singing sometimes in plays, realised that I wanted to do music. So I took myself off to the conservatorium and did handily, of course. I was like, James, have you drawn the con? Can we pop a drawing of the con in? And it's like, yeah, of course I've drawn that building. I went to like night school and did a little bit of music theory and piano, and basically just tried to meet people to start making music.
We have got notes down there. And I was, again, back in the bedroom trying to be a visual artist in that Space 3 building up the top. I was making, these were big paintings, about the size of these big wood panels here of X-ray creatures and things, mostly birds. And I was getting really frustrated because everyone would come and have a look at them, galleries included, and say, I think you're an illustrator. And I would get really pissed off because I didn't really know what an illustrator was, and I didn't want to be called an illustrator. I was a visual artist. I was going to get a gallery, and it was all going to be hunky-dory. I was happy and excited to sell artworks, but I don't think I really knew what illustration could be. So I was doing these large illustrated paintings on my own and showing them in galleries.
And one of the people that I met around this time and said, hey, do you make music? I met him at Bondi Markets, was Tom Schutzinger, who was the drummer in Decoder Ring. That was serendipitous. This is a very serendipitous moment for me. And he was in that band, and we were jamming together. And then about 6 months after that, he said, hey, we need some female vocals in our little visitor. In this soundtrack that we're making for the movie Somersault, which ended up being a really successful indie movie in Australia, and the album won awards, and it ended up being a launch for me musically. And what's interesting looking back is that the very first professional music thing that I did was writing a song for a character, which was is kind of what I do now a little bit too, but as previously been an actor, it was the perfect kind of bridge towards music for me.
And my bridge towards a similar colour scheme album cover, which was funny at the similar time, was... 2004, 2005. Yeah. And jumping back and forth from that illustrated bird picture that I was making, I went to high school with Josh Pike, who is now doing a lot of things. It says it's on the next slide, but it's not. Anyway, you can remember what it looked like. And so, yeah, he basically came to me, and I hadn't seen him for a while since high school, and he said, I think he was struggling to find someone to do artwork for his album, and he came to my studio and asked if I had anything that would be relevant for his album, and he basically just looked at my artworks and said, let's just put that on the album. So I was like, I thought that was great. It was like a version of selling an artwork. I thought, again, trying to be a visual artist, not being an illustrator, but it was quite a turning point for me, I think, because I realised that putting art in a gallery was not the only way to make visuals. I saw the potential of being more of a, illustrator, I guess, even though I didn't know what the term was, being more commercial with the pictures I was making. And I didn't have to make canvases, I could just do a little drawing and put it on different things. So he ran with it and did the album cover, and there's a whole sort of fold out that has other cross-section things, and we moved on to doing... So yeah, he took that artwork and transformed it onto everything: merch, t-shirts, the video. We did a number of those videos in a series, a whole bunch of other stuff, and I found that really exciting and liberating, that I could make all this stuff and put it onto all these different media, have control of many different media, making things. It was funny because very early on in year 10 I did a work experience at Mambo, and they had nothing for me to do in the office, so they just sent me to the silkscreen factory, much like this, with just all the Mambo shirts, which I was obsessed with as a teenager, up on the wall, and they just said, do whatever you want. So I was just grabbing screens and screen printing anything, and the guy there, I think, was like, you can screen print on wood or glass or whatever. So my mind blew in year 10, but I didn't get back to it till that point, I think, and it got blown again, that I could command all these different surfaces with my pictures.
I'd just like to point out that this is when we met, and over there it's right on the crease, there's a portrait of a man called Alex Davies, who I went to primary school with, who was in that herringbone warehouse gallery, and he is an artist. He actually teaches at UTS now, and he was making a video, and James knew him from UTS. He was making a work, and he needed lots of bodies in it, and so we were both part of the bodies in this video installation, and that's when we met at UTS. And I used decodering as a way to crack on to him. It's because we actually did need our website redone, and he told me he was a graphic designer, because that was your job at the time. And I was like, oh my God, we need a graphic designer right now. Can I get your number? And we had a meeting that James thought the band was coming to, but they didn't turn up. It's weird. But we actually didn't get together straight away. We were just friends for a little while. You went off to Indonesia. I was touring, doing like Big Day Out tour and things like that with decodering. This is around 2005.
We were both at this point when we met, where we was kind of saying yes to everything, hence being in Alex's video. And I said yes to this Indonesian art tour thing, where I went over with a friend and tried to curate a bunch of Indonesian artists to bring them back here and show their work in Australia. And I made these drawings when I was there, mostly in Jakarta. These ones, you can see the pollution stuck in my lungs and my hair and stuff. And Lenka was, going to South by Southwest with decodering, and that opened up America a bit for us later on. And then once we were back from those little sort of sidetrack jaunts, we got together properly and lived together for a little bit that's the presbytery that I was talking about before. We lived in the big white building up the top. Again, cheap and lots of space.
This image on the left is very special to me. It's that James made it for me around this era when I was just starting to do solo music and wanted to launch myself and my style and my visual identity, and he did this drawing for me, which I guess was, we've had it on t-shirts, and it might have just been a little home printed flyer or something. It's very telling of the whole style that we were starting to develop together, which was about sort of naive expression and allowing your inner child to come through confidently without trying to censor it.
And just the idea of just making stuff, like this is just cut paper flattened into Photoshop. Nothing was very...
Yeah, I'll just explain. We were in Austria living. James did a residency in Vienna, and that's where we were in that video. But we decided to both head overseas. I was going to go over and try and get a record deal, and James was applied for a few residencies like Paris, the Cité, and Vienna. So he would do 3 months at a time. I would go spend time with him, then I would go back to LA. I was just writing with people and trying to do gigs and attract the attention of the industry to try to get some support and financing to make music.
And eventually I was loving Europe and wanted to stay there and continue to be the visual artist, but eventually had to be with you and came to LA to be there, and we stayed there for 3 years, and I absolutely hated it, like a lot of people do. I eventually learned to love it a little bit. No. Halfway through I liked it, but towards the end I hated it again. But that kind of solo, obsessive, depression-y kind of vibe I was in was actually, in the end, quite crucial to where I'm at now. I started doing these drawings because LA can be so isolating. It's hard to get around. I was just drawing all the cars that I could see. I would wait for Lenka in the car while she was at a meeting, and I'd just draw all the cars around me, and I would just get into this vibe of just concentrating on one thing, and that became a real way of working for me, and I translated it to every city we found ourselves in. You know, we went back to European cities, and I'd do this, and other American cities where Lenka would go on tour, and then eventually I did this one of New York that really sort of began the rest of all my illustration style. This is a bit of a diversion, but this is in LA, and we would...
Well, I did actually land a record deal and a publishing deal. I got signed by Epic Records, which is a Sony label over there, and got sent off on a big promo tour around the world, and I got really busy. And I spent a lot of time away anyway, so this is just when we're going through the archives, we found these funny Skype videos, photos that we used to take, where we would smush our faces together. I've just always wanted to show them to somebody because they're hilarious. And James was very much a part of all that. He was my art director, I guess, but I was very confident. Like, I remember in my first meeting with the vice president at the record label upstairs in Madison Avenue in New York, and saying, you know, I am very confident with my whole visual identity, and I know what I want it to do, and I don't want you to just put me in a bikini and, you know, make a music video with flashing lights behind it. And they were like, yeah, cool. You know, this is the era where semi-indie cutesy pop was big. Feist had just had a big hit, and they were down with that. And so I was like, I've got the visuals sorted, and James came on tour with everything, and we were still doing our crappy cardboard cutouts. We would go to like Kinko's or the equivalent and make big photocopies and stick them onto cardboard. This is a gig at Largo, which is a beautiful little theatre in LA, and I wanted to do you know, my version of a really high-tech show. So we made heaps of cardboard mushrooms, and we had like cardboard ocean at the front, which we had 2 people on each side doing this with the waves and pulling the boat across, and it was a beautiful show. Nothing to say on that. Okay. So yeah, this is me with Epic and James.
Yeah, so at this point, I think maybe making stuff with you, I started to sort of realise that illustration was a thing I would rather do than doing the gallery stuff, making pictures, applying them to different media. And friends of mine were signing to Jackie Winter, which is in Melbourne. I don't know if people know it. That had just started up. I think he had like 5 other people, 2 of which of people I knew. And I sort of wrote to him naively saying, I think I need an agent, or, you know, it'd be great to have someone to sort of start doing more illustration. I really only had that Josh Pike cover and the stuff I'd done for you, and then the minute I signed with him, I got like a magazine editorial thing, and I was like, oh yeah, you can do drawings for pictures in the magazine, and that was like, just blew my mind again, and we were off rolling on that, and that's what I've been doing ever since. So those 2 commercial sort of signings, I think it's signings on the list somewhere, signing up after LA, really sort of selling in, we used to call it, as opposed to selling out. And so this kind of shows both of those sort of higher level of professional stuff, I suppose.
Bigger budgets. This is one of my music video shoots that James did all the pieces for, and then an animator made it, and we shot it on a green screen, and the monsters chased me around. This is my second music video, but in the time where I was getting big budgets from the label and getting to hire James as part of it. That's a poster for the same song. Merch poster, still very simply printed. We just made them ourselves in Berlin.
And I just slipped that in as an example of that editorial I was talking about. That was one of the first ones I did for an accounting magazine about, I don't know, seeing the future of your money or some thing that they're always on about in those magazines. But I really loved it. You know, I loved, Lenka always pays me out, but I can only draw pictures of me. Don't get me to draw a picture of any attractive lady or anything, because it doesn't come out great. But yeah, this is really, I'd always, for years after, I would pull bits out of this drawing and just, yeah, I loved how it worked out. And that relationship with magazines continued on into books and lots of other mediums again. Next one.
This is when we moved to New York, and we were living in Carroll Gardens. I was still doing a lot of touring. I think I'm on my 2nd album at this point. But James was stoked because he found this building on the right.
Yeah, just by accident. Moving to New York, you don't get to have a studio like we had making those mushrooms in LA on the floor. You know, there is no floor. We had like our bed in the kitchen, you know. in that place. It says Brooklyn smells like bacon because we were in that first floor above this deli that we called it the bacon alarm because you would literally get woken up every day by the smell of cooking bacon. But there was no room to make anything, so I had to get a studio. And I looked around and eventually found the pencil factory, which if you can see closely up the top has a whole bunch of little pencils along the top. It used to be an old Faber-Castell factory. Super cute and romantic, and I went in there and talked to the one connection I had who was a friend of Jeremy, the Jackie Winter guy, Rachel Solomon, who's an illustrator, and she just walked me around this building and it was like it was like an illustration mecca. I didn't know what I'd walked into. There was all these people in there that I'd obsessed about their websites for so long, and I just grabbed whatever studio was available, and it turned out Jessica Hish was in the studio I was in, so I was sharing with her, Leif Parsons, who became a good friend, and the other spot, some would always rotate, I don't know why, was close to the door, I suppose. But yeah, Jessica was a big sort of influence on me. I felt like I did a illustration masters in that tiny room. You know, it was an eighth of this room. It was tiny with 4 of us in there, and I was trying to do silk screening, and she was always on the phone doing interviews, getting famous, and I was just listening to her level of professionality and the way she ran her business, and her sort of obsession. Yeah, it was kind of annoying. She would talk really loud all the time, but it was great to hear.
I think the point you want to make is the doing every day, like she and those other illustrators in that space, us coming from Australia, I think we can be a little shy, and getting over to America, it happened to me in LA, everybody was like, yeah, let's just like make a hit right now. It'd be right now to be like, I'll clear my space in the studio, come tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And I'd never experienced that. Everyone here would be like, we'll have a coffee and talk about it next week. And, you know, never happened. And then James found all these people that were daily putting things up, printing things for free, giving them away, putting things online, doing blogs. It was the beginning of the, what's that blog thing called?
Blogger. Yeah, and Jessica was running the Daily Drop Cap, if you've heard of that. She was drawing a little decorative letter every day. So I was seeing those go up, and I was like, I got to do something like this. So I was on the street, took that idea that I was doing in LA, drawing all the cars, and just started drawing every building, and really had this nice childlike story behind it that I was actually going to get to drawing all of them at some point. And the press loved it, you know, New Yorkers, an outsider talking about New York. They were really onto it. So I got all this stuff, including the one you wanted to mention, Daily Candy did a post about it, and they were massive at the time. So then, you know, it was New York Times and everything after that, which also led to Rizzoli getting in touch and doing a hardcover book, which took it to a whole nother level. It was a great project running that blog. It still runs. I post to it occasionally, as well as making me make stuff. I would have this way of people to order their building, so they would write to me and say, can you come to wherever and draw my thing, and I would sometimes meet the people and have a bit of a connection to the local environment, so that was a nice part of it. I don't know what you want to say.
Oh, the other photo is just showing a music video that we made. So I was sort of starting to get a little bit disillusioned with my situation with the label, and the budgets had gone down somewhat. This video on the left is for a song of mine called Everything at Once. We were given $1,000 to hire some lights. So we went back to Kinko's, did some photocopies, stuck them up in an empty studio at the pencil factory. I got some mates of mine to dance in the background. We just literally shot it ourselves on James's Canon, and it ended up being a huge thing for me. It landed a Microsoft commercial, so a lot of money did end up coming into it, but I had to give it to Epic because they had lent us the $1,000. So it was on a worldwide commercial, and it's, you know, had multiple millions of views on YouTube, but it was still just us working in our daggy, simple, naive way. What's next? This is still the era where James was somewhat alone a lot of the time because I had to be on tour. My career opened up into Asia and Europe, especially Asia. I spent a lot of months of the year on the road. This is a show in Japan, playing festivals. Oh, look, the mushrooms are still going. I basically have like one side of a suitcase is just dedicated to my set pieces, and I take them around for as long as they survive, and once they get a bit ratty, I just throw them out into the audience. And we've never really moved on from that. I've never hired anybody to make my set pieces. We've got no pyrotechnics. It's still just felt, cardboard, paper, cutouts. James was still back doing his thing in New York.
Yeah, I mean, I was loving it. We had an apartment in New York. I would go to that Mecca illustration studio every day and go to drinks with these idols of mine. And I didn't look like that, but, you know, a lot of people in Brooklyn did and still do have. There's no way I could grow a beard like that. But I did have pink shoes. And we did live above many bodegas, including one on...
This is the era where we decided to have babies, and I got pregnant, and we lived on Bedford Avenue in Williamsburg, which is like a permanent music festival. Like 4 a.m. the bars shut. There's a bar, and then the busker starts, and he's like, "Yeah, I've got an amp and a full drum kit" at like 4 a.m. And I was pregnant and vomiting and just wanted to get out of there so badly.
Yeah, so that... hello again. Okay. So that New York book project was printing like mad. I think it's in the 8th reprint now, and it's translated into a lot of other cities' projects. But the New York one especially went around the world. I had emails from people in Argentina saying, "I love your book, I love New York, I want to go to New York someday." It was reaching people outside of the local environment, which was really amazing, including clients, which was awesome. So I was getting people just writing saying, "Oh, we love your book, can you do something like that for us?" Which I continue to get now. So it's still that process of, for me, making things all pretty much for myself, and then quickly enough they get collected up by a client or a brief that comes in. So this was the MTA in New York, who run the subway system. They have this art program where they put up these really long, thin cards in a space they reserve for artists, and they print thousands of these. It's a funny story, actually. They asked, "Can you do one?" And I was super excited. So I did a couple of sketches, and they never really gave any feedback. They were like the perfect client. They're like, "Yeah, they look great." And then I'd do some more sketches, like, "Yeah, they look great." So I just continued to pursue with 2 ideas and finished 2, basically, and they ended up running with 2, which was nice. So I had 2 of these jobs that I'd done running around in the New York subway system like a huge advertisement, which was great. And that came from that personally initiated book project.
It's very cool because people would go over to New York. We were actually back here. We'd had a baby and we were living here. And everyone that went over to New York would just like send back a photo from their phone being like, "I've just seen James on the subway." Like it was on so many trains. This is us just playing the piano at home because life has changed somewhat for me, especially. I'm kind of semi-retired. I don't do quite so much touring or music at the moment. Been busy with the kiddies, but we are maintaining a very creative life. And well, you're going to show this quote in a minute, but I have sort of started to pick up being creative again, partly because James listens to podcasts all day, and one day he came downstairs and he told me this quote that he had heard from a visual artist: "Would you still make it if no one ever saw it and you never made any money from it?" And I was busy not being creative at all. I'm retired. I'm not doing any music. I'm done. I'm having babies. That's fine. And then this quote kind of just wormed its way into my head, but it was, would if no one ever heard it for me. And literally the next day I just started getting ideas for melodies and lyrics again and started making music just for myself because the idea was so indulgent. I was like, oh my God, I can just sit down and make music that I want to make for me. And that's snowballed now into being another album. Album 5 is coming out in a couple of months, and I am going to be doing some touring in Asia and the States, and one show here if you're interested. I've got a flyer. I
was in tears to move back to Australia. It was helped having kids because we were distracted by that, but I really didn't want to leave that good time New York vibes. But it was amazing family wise and lifestyle wise, but also work wise. Being in the same country as where I'd grown up, I think there was a lot of connections there, including my agent being in Melbourne. I did this Sydney book, which again opened up a lot of people locally seeing that, but all these other big clients came on board and saw what I could do through those things. And this was a big project for Woolworths. It was national murals that they put in a bunch of their big stores. that came out nice. And then we did another one a while. This was actually before that for the Commonwealth Bank, a similar kind of thing. This was for one of their big call centres in Melbourne, where another great brief where it wasn't public, so they were like, here's some colours, make it about Melbourne, do whatever you want. So I was just drawing crazy robot guys and local Melbourne architecture with wind blowing books and fruit and things around. It was really very playful. I was drawing, again, that obsessive kind of way of working, drawing everything I could think of related to a theme and then mashing it together on the computer and laying it out. It was a similar and fun process. That's it.
And we're just going to finish up with a song, as you always should. Thanks for listening, everybody. This is a song I wrote about James, for James and the kids. It's called Lucky. You are the cherry on top, the apple of my eye. You had me at hello, and I'll never say goodbye. You're a diamond in the rough, a needle in the hay, the moon in my night, the sun in my day. And I don't know why I got so lucky. Ooh, lucky. Ooh, lucky. Ooh, lucky. Ooh, you are the cream of the crop, the crackle and pop, the icing on the cake, the smile on my face. You're the fish in the sea, the knees on the bees, the flame in my fire, stars in my sky. And I don't know why I got so lucky. Ooh, 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 lucky. Ooh. I must have thrown one hell of a dice to have you walk into my life. Lucky me. Lucky me. Oh. I'm lucky. Ooh, lucky. Ooh, lucky. Ooh, lucky me. Ooh, and I don't know why, honey. I don't know why. Listen, I don't know why I got so lucky. Thanks, guys.
Oh my God. Oh, I think we got lucky. Thank you, guys, both of you. Incredible. Oh, so we're going to do a quick Q&A. Guys, that was incredible. Thank you so much. So I hope you guys have questions. We're not going to bribe you with socks this week, because we don't have any socks. So just I hope you have questions for Lenka and James. And yeah, who's got a question? Okay, so over there. And then maybe I'll give you, and if you guys just repeat the question. So that Well, the question was about how did the decoder ring connection come about. They knew Kate Shortland, the director, somehow. I think I think they had been doing a little bit of soundtrack stuff. Maybe they'd done a short film before that. So she asked them to do the film soundtrack. They went down to Tom's farm in Kiama and watched the rushes of the film and made the music, a style which we used to like to call bellcore because it has lots of glockenspiels in it. It was all set in the Snow Mountains, so it's a lot of strings and shoegazer guitar, and it's a beautiful album. So it was just instrumental. Then Kate said she would like some female vocals on it. So Tom, who I'd been jamming with, got me round to his house in Bondi, and I was given some words by Kate, some like poetry basically of the kind of imagery, because I hadn't seen the rushes, and I just kind of wrote something over the music that they had, and we ended up going up to a studio up in Gosford and sort of finishing it off a bit because it was very short, and it ended up becoming like a single on Triple J. It was in the Triple J Hottest 100, and it all kind of cemented slowly, but it was pretty organic process. Good times.
Sure. So the question's about where I draw my inspiration from and what particular city does influence me in what way. It's not about the place, you know. Every place is interesting, you know. Like LA was so crucial in developing something, but I hated it and didn't want to be there. And you know, drawing in that context was really helpful, you know. Like when it was maybe harder in New York. I mean, that's such an inspiring place. It's not a very good example, but because there's so much other stuff to do, you know. When you're stuck in a train station in some nothing town in Russia, which I've done, you do amazing drawings because you're like, wow, look at that lady's shoes, and you've got nothing else to look at. You know, you really start to draw out the interesting things, and doing a lot of traveling helped me do that, you know, develop that ability to sit and look and watch. And that whenever I run like workshops about drawing, that's always what it's about. It's not about where you are or how amazing New York or Bangkok or wherever it is. It's, you know, this place is amazing. You just got to sit and start drawing the tiny little plug and the amazing windows, and before you know it, you've spent an hour embracing this place, and you'll never forget it because you've made this beautiful little drawing that's yours, and no one can take that away from you.
Well, of course, when you ask our other question is about being parents and creatives. When you ask our big boy who's 5, Quinn, what are you going to be when you grow up? He says an artist and a dad. So obviously they're going to mimic their parents, and it's completely normal. And the other thing he says is like, if something's expensive and I'm like, you know, that's really expensive, we can't buy that. He says, well, mummy, you have to make more songs and dad has to do more drawings. So his understanding of the economic way the world works is that creativity makes money, because that's how it works for us. Crack that whip.
When he was a tiny little baby, I actually got heaps done because he was sleeping a lot. Well, he wasn't a very good sleeper, but I would always have him in the baby Bjorn asleep. So I did like a whole kids book with him on my chest. I tried to find a photo of it because it's a super cute idea, but we didn't have one. But yeah, I would just draw and draw and draw. And he instinctively has picked up the pencil, and we now draw together a lot. But we had a note about it, but it's micro moments now, we find, you know, like we're not making videos of us riding our bikes through the forest, because you'd have to pay a babysitter $180 for the day, and we don't have 2 bikes, and, you know, it's just too hard, you know. So you really have to take these nuggets, and we both work from home, thank God, because if I had to go to the studio, you'd get nothing done. Like sometimes I'll wake up crack of dawn and do an hour before they're awake. You know, you really sort of mix it in to the life. It's all mashed up together.
Like we go to bed at 8:30 and we get up at like 4 or 5 in the morning. So that's kind of the work day fits into the hours. I do like 1 hour of work on my album, and then I've got mum and I'm off. So I'm just like, when I get a small moment when the baby's asleep and Quinn's busy, I'm just like in my home studio with my headphones on doing some synths, and that's all I get. So
And you've always called me a precrastinator, which has come into handy now. You know, like you don't there's no time to procrastinate. You've got to do it right now. Like this talk, we got asked to do it, and I'd done that map like the next day. You know, you just do it straight away. You never know when the time's going to come. Yeah.
that's true. We actually sorted this all out weeks ago, and we haven't looked at it since then because we're like, we might not get a chance. Let's just do it now. Yes?
I've definitely made lots of charts like this. I love making. I didn't show it much in here, but doing maps and stuff, explaining information in my style, cute text and all the sort of wobbly line maps and stuff. But yeah, this is the first crack at this is our life in a map. I don't really know what we're going to do with it. Frame it, put it on the wall. No.
Well, I will say that I'm lucky that James is a very nice person and doesn't like too much conflict. There was a few wobbly moments in the early days in LA where we nearly broke up because it was kind of just not going to work. You know, how do you do it? You do have to have a fairly cutthroat focus in the early times, I think, when you're starting out. Now I don't have it's not a priority for me. My work wouldn't be the priority. Family life would be the priority. So if James wanted to move somewhere, we would go wherever he wanted to go. So I guess it's just about give and take for us. He's like, okay, I'll remember that if I want to go somewhere. You said it publicly. Is that it? So the question's about setbacks in the journey, and I would say, like on the theme of serendipity, I and we discuss it. Like if something seems like a setback, like a dead end, or something falls through career-wise, not going the way you want it to be, I think that that's sort of meant to be, and you just change directions and you go where things are good. Where yes, people. I don't like the word opportunist because it sort of has a bad reputation of people being like too thirsty or something. But I am a fairly opportunistic person whereby I'll go where it seems like the waters are kind. I'm not going to push against the hard times. So when we've had setbacks, it's just been a change in direction.
And going back to that, sharing the studio with Jessica, that idea of just making stuff, like when there's downtime for me, there's never downtime because I'm just making stuff anyway. Like a setback for me would be there's no clients and there's no money. But that doesn't worry me because I'm just going to make a silkscreen for myself, and inevitably in 2 months a client's going to say, I want to put that silkscreen on my packaging. Like it just seems to work out that way. But having that drive, you have to have that drive to just make stuff all the time, regardless of what's going on. That's for me. Yeah.
Yeah, putting it into your own power where you are making it for you no matter what, and you'll find a place. And with the internet nowadays, there's always a platform for you to show your work. You just do it. Then there are no setbacks. Thank you so much.